Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Small Acreage Horticultural Crops webinar. Today's topic is Introduction to Hydroponics, presented by Dr. Daniel Lescovar. He's professor of plant physiology, vegetable physiology. He's located at the Uvalde Research Center. With that, I'd like to thank Dr. Lescovar for joining us and presenting his topic. And I turn your presentation to you, Dr. Lescovar. Go ahead.
Good morning, Joe, and good morning, everyone online. This is going to be an experience for me. It's the first time I'm doing a webinar, so bear with me. But Joe will be a very good help in case something happens. I will present some slides discussing some aspects of hydroponics, basically some principles of hydroponic systems, some considerations, components, monitoring, and then give you some few examples of hydroponic system particularly for vegetable crops, especially leafy greens. I will ask Joe to change the slides since we have some issues in terms of the automatic changing from here. So with that, Joe, if you can change for the next one. Good. So as you know, Texas has been facing critical water issues. In part for the biggest drought in 2011, but water has been the underlying umbrella of most of the agricultural activities, which goes parallel to the urban demands, metropolitan demands for water due to the increased plant population in Texas, particularly for the main metro areas of San Antonio, Dallas, Houston. So water is a critical commodity. Here in the winter garden, most of our programs are somehow related to water conservation strategies. Here in this slide, you see that when we look at integrated strategies, we have to look at technologies and also management, also at the type of crops or plants that we're growing, and if possible, looking at more drought-tolerant crops. But the point here I'm going to mention for today is that one of the irrigation technologies quite different as compared to the open field cultivation is growing plant in hydroponic systems. So I'm going to concentrate on that part, but just to give you an idea that we are in our research group concentrating in other activities related to management of the crops, both in the field and also in controlled environments. Next. So hydroponics, the definition of hydroponics comes from the Greek words. Hydro means water and ponos means labor or work. So basically, combining the two words, hydroponics means working water. So trying to make water to work for the benefit of growing plants. So the principle basically is to grow plants in a nutrient solution. You need to have nutrients you can have with water for the early stages of development, but we need to have nutrients to have a good crop. And then this system can have artificial media or without artificial media, and I will show some examples on that. This is just, I put this picture just for illustrating hydroponics, the one that we have here at the research center. Next. Next, Joe. Yeah. So we always look, okay, in terms of is this technology new? And in reality, it's actually very ancient technology. So it has been practiced for centuries. And a good example is the floating gardens that were implemented by the Aztecs in Mexico. So basically, like you see there is a combination of plants and trees that grow in using floating systems. So that defines very well on working water. So working water for the benefit of producing crops and growing trees. Next. A good example also of hydroponics, just going back in the history, is during the Second War, it's in 1945, you see here in the island of Ascension Island, military personnel growing veggies for their own consumption, living in the island. And then even though the picture is in black and white, you see there an array of boxes from left to right. And I want you to tell me, I don't know if you can speak, but to think about, which are the vegetable crops that you think they are in those boxes. I mean, it's probably very clear, one or two, but I'm not sure, Joe, if the people can speak, but is that a possibility? Joe, can you hear me? Okay, well, hopefully everyone can hear me. And so when you look at the vegetables from left to right, so you will see cucumbers, you will see tomatoes, those are the next two boxes, you will see peppers, and then you will see 5 boxes of lettuce. So just by these are the typical crops that you will grow in hydroponic systems, and leafy greens, particularly lettuce, are one of the most common in hydroponic systems. Of course, tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers are quite also common in controlled environment with fully automatic systems. Next. So, how do you classify the hydroponic system? So we can have maybe 2 classifications. One is based on the media or the medium. So one is without the medium, or called mediumless hydroponic systems. So basically, the plants have not a supporting medium for them for holding the plant. So the second one is growing plants having a medium to support the plant. And I will show you some examples of that. Then, in terms of the management of the nutrient solution, water and nutrients, we have 2 systems. One is open system, and basically the nutrient solution is delivered to through the system to the plants, but it's not being reused. Contrary to that, the closed system, basically, once the nutrient solution goes to the plants, it goes into a container, and then this is again recycled to the plants, and then that is continuously done, and then with automatic or manual replenishment, depending on the level of the nutrient solution in the tanks. Next. So this is an example of a hydroponic system without the medium. It's using a floating system. So basically, in this case, if you see on the right, you see the plants supported by a styrofoam raft that basically is holding the plants, and then you have basically the container with the nutrient solution in constant contact with the roots. And then also it's important to have in this system oxygenation and so aeration in the nutrient solution. But the bottom line is this is a static system, so whereas the plants and the roots are in contact with the nutrient solution. Next. Another hydroponic system considered mediumless, which is quite common, perhaps one of the most common, is NFT system called the nutrient flow technique. So in this case, the roots, the plant roots are in contact with the nutrient solution, but are in contact with the flow of nutrient solution. So if you look at the graph on the right, so basically the system has a container as the nutrient solution. You have a pump a water pump that elevates the water to one end of the table. The table has to have a slope for the water movement. Typically 3% is a good slope, and then the water will flow through the channels till the end of the table, and then going back to the container where it's again recycled back. As you see there, it's important to have an air pump, aeration of the water, just to increase the oxygenation of the system. So you see the application of that. This is some pictures of our tables showing the NFT, which is common rectangular tubing, and you have the two kind of a spaghetti on top, and then the water will go in two channels on the left and the right side of each one of the troughs. And you see there a picture on the lower left showing the container and the pump, and then the aeration, the little controller for the aeration. Next. The third one in terms of medium-less hydroponic system is we call it hydroponics. So basically, not much difference as compared to the previous one, to the NFT, but in this case, the roots are suspended in a mist of the nutrient solution. So instead of having a flow, so here it's just misting, and then the mist gets in contact with the roots, and then you basically have different type of contact with the humidified air into the roots as compared to the flow that we have in the NFT system. Next. Now, in terms of the medium, one of the common one is just basically using some volcanic rock or some sand or some gravel that use as a support or anchor in the plants, and then these plants are placed in a small table, and then the water, this is kind of a flotation or ebb and flow system, so that the water moves up and down based on the frequency of irrigation. So you have a pump, you have an ebb and flow cycle. And this is like typically, some of you may be familiar with growing transplants, containerized transplants, like the speedling type. So there are some facilities in Florida and California that they use the ebb and flow or the flotation systems. Initially, those growers were growing actually constant flotation, like growing tobacco transplants, but then they realized that it's important to have cycles of irrigation and drying, because if you have continuously constant water, you encourage too much root growth, and potentially it has some issues with diseases. So the ebb and flow system basically goes up and down based on the frequency of irrigation. Next. And so when we're looking at the not leafy greens, but mostly of the solanaceous crops like tomatoes or peppers, or cucurbit crops like cucumber, the typical growing medium is actually rock wool, sand beds, it could be gravel beds, but also other media that I mentioned here, like sawdust, cocoa coir, peat, vermiculite, perlite, and rice hulls. So it all depends on where are you located, and then the cost of the media is very, very critical, and the volume. I mean, do you have enough for producing X amount of volume of plants or produce? So we do have a project in South Africa where sawdust is the most common media for growing hydroponic plants like tomatoes and cucumbers, and in part, sawdust is very cheap, and then importing rock wool is not a good economical option for those small farm growers. So anyway, it's a little story, but on the left side you see tomato plants growing in rock wool. This is a very typical system, very common in Europe, particularly in Holland, Canada, and in Asia. you see cucumbers growing in sandbeds, or more gravel system that is more adapted to small farmers. It's probably economical as well. So you see some combination of tomatoes and cucumber plants. Next one. And of course, you have some variations from the hydroponic system that is becoming quite interesting, especially at the hobby level or small farm level, some vertical farming. This could be actually much more important when the value of the land is extremely high. So if you're going to talk about producing plants where an acre is several $100,000, like it could be in Japan, so you want to maximize the efficiency of the surface, and then basically vertical farming makes sense. If you are going to grow vegetable crops, leafy greens in a highly populated area near metro areas, or actually in metro areas, now vertical farming has a good potential to be implemented in that. But if you are like we are in Southwest Texas, we have to consider the cost and benefit of growing vertical versus horizontal production. In fact, hydroponics not only is good for small, medium farmers, but there's quite a bit of production going in open field, and I have some collaborative colleagues that working in Italy and Spain, whereas the hydroponic system has been implemented also in the field conditions. Next. I mentioned before, so some of the common species, just to illustrate again that the most commonly used for demand and for price are shown here. So you see lettuce and tomatoes and peppers and strawberries, and then a variety of leafy greens. Basil is one, some herbs, but basil is quite common in hydroponic systems, and then in cucumbers. But you can grow a lot of other crops. So the question obviously is, what is the aim of growing hydroponic? Is just for your own consumption? Is for the farmers market? Is for the commercialized through retailers? So that dictates a lot the type of crop, the size of the plant. So if you go for restaurants, for example, you may have to diversify the type of species that you grow, because the demand is quite different. You may have a much more variety of leafy greens that you could grow as if you're going to produce for large-scale production. Next one. And then this is some of the illustration of the early development when we grow the plant. This is some early experiment that we conducted in leafy greens, using some small seedlings. We grow first the seedlings in rock wool cubes, and here you see some lettuce and some kale that are growing prior to transplanting into the hydroponic tables. These plants probably are around 20 days from seeding. Next. And this is just a much more advanced stage. Some of them close to maturity. You see the different lettuce type on the top left. See some mustards and kale and Swiss chard, and then some more mature dark and loose leaf lettuce on the lower left. Next. All right. So this why hydroponics and what are the advantages? So, as I mentioned before, soils, when you don't have good soils, or when you don't have land, or the land is too expensive, so hydroponics have a good possibility to be grown in any place. The other aspect important for growing, for example, vegetable crops, is that many of the practices that are common in the feed production, like cultivation, weeding, disking, and spraying, many are not are not used in hydroponics, or some, like spraying, could be almost eliminated or very minimal. The other component is that productivity on an area basis is quite high as compared to the field production, especially because you can really have almost 100% of plants, one seedling, one plant. So basically, you can have a high density production, and in addition, you can have a much more cycles of production. So in the field, you may have 2 or 3 cycles, while in the hydroponic system, you may have 6 or 7 cycles, depending on the crop that you are growing. Now, the important aspect is the conservation of the water and nutrients. So this has important implications for environmental considerations, as we know that pollution of water streams, pollution of soil is very critical. So by having either a recirculated system or maybe an open system that you can reuse the nutrient solution that you have in the first crop. Give an example. So we have this project in South Africa, in the Limpopo province, whereas we are growing lettuce, the students are growing lettuce, cucumbers and tomatoes, and then this is an open system, and so we're then from each one of the greenhouse, we're collecting the nutrient solution going into a underground tank. The nutrient is elevated to another tank, and then from that is delivered as a sprinkler system to an orchard, whether it's peaches or moringa or some other subtropical plants that we're growing there. So it's not a true recycle or recirculating system, but it's a combination that we are recycle the first nutrient solution used for the main hydroponic system into an open field and to do a fertigation system for those fruit trees. So another consideration is that because of the system components and the infrastructure growing in greenhouses or tunnels, the tendency is to have a much more reduction of pests and diseases. Although it can be critical, if you're not careful in terms of insects. You may have you have to be careful about the environment, the humidity. White flies can be a problem. Powdery mildew can be a huge problem if the environment is pretty humid. So you have to monitor that very well. Hydroponics also offer the advantage of having a better control of the system, meaning system components like the nutrition, like the water, and you can monitor that by measuring the pH and electrical conductivity of the system. And I will go a little bit in detail on these 2 parameters. And transplant shock in many cases is reduced, particularly if you are going to transplant in the summer. In the field, as you know, transplants suffer because of the imbalance between transpiration from the leaves and water uptake from the roots. So in the case of the hydroponic system, because you have some way of controlling the temperature, you can transplant in the summer, and since you have constant flow of water, those seedlings tend to have much less transplant shock as compared to growing those plants in open field. Next. But like any other system, it's important to consider disadvantages. And the first one, which is very critical, is the cost. So the initial cost, the operational cost, are much higher than in the open soil culture. Another aspect is that it requires skills that are specific for the hydroponics. We're not talking here about labor like in the field, but you need to have, you need to become skillful about how to operate the system, how to look at the plants, look at measure nutrient solution in terms of pH and EC. So it requires some important controlling points at the beginning. Then once the system is up and running. So as you familiarize, it's a much easier to use and to monitor. Now, I mentioned about the diseases and insects, and also nematodes could be a problem. So you have to be careful in closed systems to monitor the systems and to disinfect the system once you finish up your production cycle. And I put the last point here in bold because this is very important, is that the plants, while they're growing in hydroponics, they're growing very nicely. Any change can affect the growth and development very rapidly. So if you have a change in the pH, if you have a change in the EC, if you have extremely high temperature, your cooling pads, so for some reason stop working, that could be devastating. So this is one of the disadvantages compared to the open field in soils, because we tend to say that the open fields, plants they have a little bit more time to respond if you have some stress, because obviously you have soils, with water holding capacity, so that they can mitigate part of the stresses associated maybe with drought or with heat. But in the case of the hydroponic system, it is very critical that to monitor those conditions, to be able to anticipate problems, or if you have a problem, be able to catch the problem very quickly so you can react and fix the situation. Next. All right, so nutrient solution is very critical. And obviously, you don't have soils, you don't have the macro and the micronutrients. And here you see different formulations that vary in terms of the amounts of macronutrients and micronutrients. So we're talking about a total of 12 nutrients, and 6 of them considered macronutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, NPKs, and then calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. So you see from those tables that the higher numbers corresponds to nitrogen and also potassium, and calcium. So these are very important elements for growing plants in hydroponic systems. But you have to be also be aware about the micronutrients, and these are another 6 micronutrients with much lower concentrations. And you see one of the important ones that can have some problems is if you run in low levels of iron, for example. And you see from the micronutrients that iron is the one that requires a little bit more than other, like copper or zinc or manganese. Next one. And so the good thing is that there's a variety of nutrient solutions in the market. I'm not going to mention which one to use because it's quite large. But these commercial formulations that they not only tend to have a complete macro and micronutrients, but also there are some that are crop specific or maybe stage specific. So when I say crop specific, there might be some formulations more in tune for fruiting crops like cucumbers, peppers, or tomatoes. There may be others more for leafy greens. So some they have more enhancement of certain nutrients for flowering, while others have more for vegetative growth, like nitrogen for leafy greens. So it's a tremendous amount of nutrient solutions that are in the market that the growers can experiment in these systems. Next one. So again, it's important to consider the strength of the nutrient solution and the composition of the nutrient solution. And then an aspect is that typically plants require less when they are small, require more when they are bigger. So that relates to the stage of development. So if we are growing leafy greens, for example, of lettuce, we may end up with the very low levels of nitrogen at the very beginning, and then increase the level of nitrogen while the seedling is growing, and then just standardize that once it's transplanted into into the beds. So different species tomatoes may have different requirements depending on the stage of development, and so it's important that you can get familiar, or once if you decide to grow one or two species in terms of the requirements of the plants. Next. Some of you probably have seen about this graph. This relates to the pH, and pH, for those that are not familiar, is a parameter that measures the acidity or alkalinity of the nutrient solution. And the pH is very critical because it affects the availability of nutrients, particularly the micronutrients. Even though the micronutrients are in a much lower concentration as compared to the macronutrients, pH is very critical. So let's say you see over there a graph, and you see that there is an optimal pH, and there is a deficiency at lower pH, and some deficiencies at higher pH. So the optimal pH is somewhere in between 5.5 to 6.5. If you go from the bottom to the top, you will see for each one of the elements that the bars or the graphs are very thick. That means that there is much more availability of these nutrients if you have a pH around 6 to 6.5. Now, if you go for a lower pH, less than 5.5, you will see that in terms of micronutrients, they're pretty good with the exception of the molybdenum. But the majority of the macronutrients at lower pH, except mostly for phosphorus and calcium, the availability is much low. So if you look at pH of 5, you will see that it's very narrow, those bands for each one of the macronutrients. Now, if you go to the right side, you see a pH larger than 7. You will see that most of the macronutrients appear to be okay. Of course, if you go for pH 8, 8.5, then you have problems in nitrogen. But the majority of the macronutrients are okay. By the way, most of the soils in the Edwards Aquifer in our region, the majority are on the silty clay soils with more alkaline soils, pH somewhere between 7.5 to 8. But there seems to be really good soils, and still we have some decent levels of micronutrients. Now, in nutrient solution, you see that if you got pH 7, 7.5, you may have problems with some micronutrients like manganese, copper, and zinc, and iron. So it's important to consider that keeping a pH, if possible, around 6, 6.5 is much better for growing high-quality plants as compared to lower or higher pH. Next. Right, as I mentioned, if you can maintain that pH, 5.5 to 6.5 is pretty good. So here are some pictures showing some deficiencies by low pH. You see the different symptoms for tomato plants, tomato leaves, showing a very low nutrient availability for nitrogen at low pH, potassium, you see some burning, magnesium and calcium. And then on the other hand, you see at the high pH, the deficiencies of the macronutrients, particularly zinc and iron. So you see that the expression is quite dramatic in this case, to the point that you have some not only chlorosis but also death of the tissue in the leaves. So this is again an important consideration, just to try to avoid these deficiencies, because once you have the system, the plant have to react, and then have to take some time to get them to the normal level. If you're producing a plant and then you see the plant with such level of chlorosis, like is showing here for the nitrogen, which is the top left picture, that's going to be very difficult to compose, to improve, because you already have a chlorophyll degradation, and it's not going to be reactivated, or that chlorophyll. So the plant needs to manufacture more, and more likely will not be able to do at that level of chlorosis. Next. So adjusting the nutrient solution pH is not complicated. Again, in the market, you will find ways of adjusting by different salts. If you need to increase the pH because you have a pH of less than 5, you can adjust that by adding sodium or potassium, and those two that mentioned there, sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide, are two elements that can be used. And basically, you can see very clear the advertisement that you have pH up, so the lower right box showing a base formulation for increasing the pH. On the contrary, if you have alkaline situation, you need to reduce the pH, and then you're going to go into acids. And so you want to lower the pH, and the typical acid formulation are based of nitric acid or sulfuric acid or hydrochloric acid. So you can adjust pH using some of these materials that are available in the market. Next. All right, so in terms of EC stands for electrical conductivity, and it's an index of the salt concentration in the solution. So it is an indicator of the availability of the ions that are important for the plant root uptake. So typically the EC values from the hydroponic system range a good range from 1.5 to 2.5. So it's important to monitor the pH, and here there are some considerations that the EC, not the pH. If the EC is going down, indicates that the roots are removing nutrients from the solution, and then you need to adjust and apply more fertilizers to replenish the nutrient concentration. Now, if the EC is going up, that means that much more water is being removed from the nutrient solution at a very, very, very rapid rate, and this happens during conditions of hot days or low humidity. So there is much more transpiration from the plants, more transpiration than there is not really much evaporation because you have growing plants in those channels. So anyway, you have to be monitoring that and then adjust the EC to try to maintain between those 1.5 to 2.5. Next. And here you see several portable meters for pH and EC. They are quite inexpensive, so they range from $100, $300, $400. You can go up to $1,000. That's expensive, but those are important for any hydroponic system. Next. And here we see Basil Servain, who is working in our project, working in monitoring pH and EC. Actually, we're doing that on a daily basis. But in a commercial production, you can have automatic controllers that monitor the nutrient solution and adjust the pH and EC by injecting the proper acid or base or salt to either modify the pH up and down. Next. One of the problems that is common in lettuce growing in the summer production, where temperature is high and transpiration of the plant is high, and then the humidity of the environment can be low, is tip burn. And this happens particularly in those leafy greens, especially lettuce that are growing very fast, at a fast rate. And the beet type lettuce and the romaine type lettuce are two of the types that can express a high level of stick burn when you grow hydroponic lettuce during late spring, early summer. Part of our work or our research actually is looking at screening different type of lettuce varieties, and so looking at maybe the genetic tolerance or way of mitigating this problem, but also looking at modifying the nutrient solution with medium or high levels of calcium, supplementing calcium. So we are actually screening right now these different lettuce, particularly beef and romaine type. Next. All right. Important just quickly about the temperature and oxygen in the nutrient solution. Temperature also can have an impact in the uptake of the nutrients. Typically, low temperature increase the uptake of nitrates, but may decrease the water and other nutrient uptake, while a high temperature may promote much more vegetative growth, but at the same time, they may be affecting the fruit set or maybe delay maturity in the case if you're talking about tomatoes. But also high temperature in the nutrient solution can decrease the oxygen availability, increase the root respiration, and those conditions also are prone for causing problems in roots called root rot problems, which are a disease. I'm going to have a couple of slides related to that. Next. And here you see a picture of a root system infected by a common disease called common root rot disease. It's a fungal-like disease caused by Pythium. And once you have this, it spreads very quickly in the system. So you have plants that are stunted, with root tips, from pale to brown to dead, and the plant will really not survive these conditions if it's very much spread out to the system. So you have to be very careful because it can be spread out extremely quick. Next. So as I mentioned, it's very difficult to control some of the diseases once they enter into the hydroponic system. So every effort should be placed to try to prevent diseases. And so it's important to have cleaning. Every time you finish your cycle, just spend time to clean the components. If you're using a potting mix, make sure that you have some level of pasteurization or heat pasteurization to decrease the potential diseases associated with that. But there's obviously certain optimum temperature and time to do this pasteurization. So if you go too high, you may even kill beneficial organisms that are in the media. So make sure also that you store the components, seeds and media in an area that we have free of contamination. Next. Again, sanitation, it's important to reiterate that the more sanitation you have, the less pest problems you may end up. And so it's very simple, a way to try to reduce the pests associated with this kind of environment that they may be interested to go. I mean, whiteflies, they love to go into a greenhouse because the conditions are much more favorable for them in terms of temperature and reproduction. So use clean, sterilized containers, as I mentioned. Get away from foreign other plants that you don't know they're leaching. Maybe tools that has to be clean. Whenever possible, if just try to use some resistant cultivars. And here where we are doing this screening because we want to be able to tell you which one of the lettuce varieties have perhaps less tip burn possibilities or expressions compared to others that may be good but may express more tip burn during summer production. And of course, keep light a way to prevent the algae grow that may affect even the tubing or the flow of the water or clogging the piping in the system. Next. And here it shows just typical pests, not any different than what you have in the open field. But the most common affecting hydroponic system, as I mentioned, are whitefly, mites, aphids, leaf miner, thrips, gnats, and some caterpillars and cutworms and mealybugs also are quite common under greenhouse conditions where the hydroponic systems are established. Next. And quickly in the few slides, I'm going to show some examples. So this is a hydroponic system, not on tables, it's on the ground using a gravel-based system. This is actually in one of my colleagues in South Africa. So they're growing, this is like an experimental site, but I've seen this commercially, growing lettuce it's a reticulated system. So basically the water moves from the top and then down with the slope and then goes into a reservoir and then they recycle back into the table. So you see a very nice, healthy lettuce plant with a healthy root system. And this is one of our students working in a Limpopo province, experimenting with different lettuce types using sawdust. As I mentioned, it's a very common media in South Africa. And so you see the hydroponic tables and then the drip irrigation between the two. And this is the one that was mentioned to you, that we recycle the waters, the nutrient solution, going back into a tank, and then from that deliver into an open field to an orchard. Next. Next. There's a little delay in between the next slides. Maybe we're stuck in the next one. If you can, if not, you can go to the next one, Joe. Okay, good. So this is a very interesting system. It's an NFT also, but they're using pipes. But it's an interesting because of the magnitude. So it's a very large operation, about 40 acres, growing different lettuce types. And then you see basically using pipes as a supporting system. It's a medium-less, so there is no medium attached to the root, but basically the holes are and the pipes are sustaining the transplants into the. Sorry, this is a medium one because they grow in the ceilings in rock wools, and then they put this into the pipe, and then very good production, and the level of technology is quite low. So this is basically in an open system with a kind of open connected hoop houses that are very large areas for production. So good quality for this low-tech system. Next. And one of the questions that we have is when we started with working with hydroponics is how the plants growing in hydroponics compared to the one growing in the open field using subsurface drip irrigation or SDI or linear irrigation systems or LIPA systems. So it's basically a sprinkler system. You don't see the drip because it's subsurface. The top two pictures are with subsurface drips, kale, collards, and spinach and lettuce. And at the bottom, you see the linear system on the back, the same crops, kale, collards, and lettuce. So we did some comparison, and you can go to the next one, Joe. And compared to plants growing in the NFT system inside, and these are the lettuce growing in that. And so as you can see, the plants growing very nicely and very uniform, and then one seed, one seedling, one plant. So it's very consistent in terms of uniformity and volume. Next one. And of course, when we do this, again, just to reiterate the parameters that we are using to compare the growth and development of the plants in the field and also in the hydroponic system. And this shows the different stages and some of the measurements that we were conducting by comparing from germination all the way till harvest and quality. Next. And this table, sorry for all the numbers, don't just concentrate only on the first column, days. Here is basically a comparison of the plants growing. This is for lettuce only in the NFT hydroponics on the first line, and comparing to a linear system called LIPA or subsurface drip. And then we also use deficit irrigation called 70%. Crop evapotranspiration and 100%. But the bottom line I want to mention here is that if you look at the number of days, the plants growing in the hydroponic system basically is almost close to half the time, 60% less time as compared to plants growing in the field. If you look at the last two columns in red color, you will see that WUE stands for water use efficiency. You see that the plants growing in a hydroponics has a tremendous amount of efficiency, 80 grams per liter as compared to 6 to 11. So much higher water use efficiency. Next one. And we expanded to different varieties of lettuce. This is different varieties growing the NFT versus subsurface drip irrigation. These are different varieties of lettuce, like salad bowl red, pro green, creme green, etc. Butter crunch, the first one, BC, and you see that the water use efficiency is by far, it's about 95% higher as compared to the ones in the field. So it goes across all varieties of lettuce and also other leafy greens. Next one. And this is kind of a summary of comparing those three systems, SDI, LIP, and hydroponics, and just basically to reinforce that the water use efficiency in the middle you see is extremely low for hydroponics and very high and medium for SDI. The other aspect is that the days to harvest, precocity, you see an orange line there, is much earlier in hydroponics and late under the other two open fields. And if you look at the overall appearance of the product, it's actually very excellent in the hydroponics and quite good in both open field, but you have much more visual and appearance for the quality of those growing in hydroponics. Next one. And we were actually expanding the aspect related to quality to reach out the consumers and see if the consumers care about the way the leafy greens are growing. Working in conjunction with Dr. Marco Palma, an economist, we've done a consumer preference study, and about 200 people participated in these sessions, and very interesting information related to the how much the consumer is willing to pay, whether you grow a plant organic or open field or in hydroponics. One of the critical points is that when you provide them information of how the plants were growing, consumers are willing to pay a premium for that additional information because social responsibility, growing plants with more environmental considerations for the consumers is important. So it's a very detailed study, but the point here is that we are interested also to grow these plants to make sure that the consumers will accept and enjoy this produce, and even though they may pay a little premium. Next one. So just to summarize the last two slides, make sure you have a good water supply in your hydroponic system. Quality of the water is very important, as we mentioned, because also quality of the water is related to the pH. Monitor very closely the pH and the EC. Make sure you have a good aeration of the system, and frequently inspect and clean all of the components, especially after you finish your cycle. Use good quality plant materials, starting from seeds, or if you get the transplants, or if you grow your own transplant, make sure they are disease-free. If you have a doubt there might be a disease or insect, do not use those. Next one. Again, clean and disinfect everything possible. Try to monitor the nutrient solution and the temperature. Scout for pests and diseases and nutrient disorders. Try to catch them if possible before they express. But sometimes, there is no other option. So you need to react quickly to try to ameliorate that problem. In many cases, when the growers have problems, it takes quite a little longer time to realize it could be too late. So maintain the nutrient solution system covered to prevent the algae growth, and there's also another consideration. And I think with that, I have some next one. For some of you that want to deeper in some of this information, there's some good references. There is a good book in hydroponic production, and this is available available information. Next one. And then again, I want to thank first all of you for participating in this seminar, and also thanks to the support that we got from the Texas Department of Agriculture through the Specialty Crop Block Program, and also the community where we are working in conjunction with the Uvalde Underground Water District, and actually the Nutrition Center from Uvalde. We are extending the production for the hydroponic system to a nutrition center where elderly people mostly go there for their free lunches or dinners. And of course, the personnel in my group, my team, Dr. Alma Solis started 2 years ago, and Basil Serven, Juan Manuel, and Adra for their assistance in the project. And with that, thank you very much. I'm not sure if there is time for questions, Joe. I took a little longer because I was told I had to be speaking very slow, and normally I speak very fast. Thank you.
Okay, are you there? We have a question.
Yes.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I have a question on aeration. How much air and what kind of a pump would I use for, say, a 36 to 48 neti pot, a 3-inch neti pot, running a PVC pipe, a 6-inch diameter or 8-inch diameter? It's the kind that you use for tubing, for plumbing.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in terms of the hydraulics, but there is always a relationship between the pump and then the volume and the flow that you are going to use in your system. So you're gonna have to look at your flows. But the one that we have is a standard one that you buy in Farm Tech or other. And in terms of aeration, we haven't done low, medium, and high levels of oxygen. Basically, we are in between half of to full aeration in the water solution. I have a colleague of mine who has done some work on aeration in floating systems, and there is some information related to that. But for the better conditions, it seems that high level of aeration is actually more recommended as compared to low levels.
What horsepower pump do you use? A half horsepower or electric?
We use the low one, the electric one.
Thank you.
Any other question, Joe?
I have a question. Is there any kind of seminar similar as this in Spanish? Or
I don't have any in Spanish.
You have nothing in Spanish? Oh, okay.
But it's something that we can work on if you're interested in
Oh, yes. I got a big group. They would like to learn how to do those kinds. We watched some videos before, and I'm an agriculture engineer, but we never see this one in my college because I started studying my college like
Hay unos
20.
libros muy buenos en español. Uno de los mejores autores en hydroponics en español, principalmente en tomate.
Do you have tiene
Information.
Okay, great. Thank you. Bye.
¿Cuál es la pregunta? Yo hablo un poco de español.
Bueno, la pregunta nada más era si tenías este tipo de seminarios en español o alguna página de internet donde pudiéramos meternos, porque tengo un grupo grande de personas interesadas en... yo soy presidente de la Iglesia de Jesucristo de los Santos de los Últimos Días.
Ajá.
Y ellos me pidieron si pudiéramos tener un tipo de seminario como estos. Dije, primero necesito checar con ellos si lo tienen en español y poder ver dónde podemos ingresar o registrarnos con ustedes, ¿verdad?
Sí, no tenemos en este momento hecho en español, digamos, online o en el web, pero bueno, se podría considerar coordinar mejor y hacer, si los tiempos dan, podríamos ver la posibilidad de darle un seminario más o menos esto en español también.
Grandioso. Voy a estar en contacto con ustedes para averiguar eso.
Ok, bien, gracias.
Gracias a ustedes.
Anything else? Thank you so much. That's all we have in our...
Thank you for participating. Thank you, Joe. Is that okay?
I was just wondering if you could send us a copy of the presentation and if you had any data comparing yield in different hydroponic systems.
Yeah, we are not comparing right now. That's the plan. Oh, can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear, Laura? Danielle, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
I have a quick question. You mentioned the initial high cost. Let's say a typical 30 by 96 foot high tunnel, and somebody wants to build a hydroponic system. Roughly what, 20,000, 25,000? Roughly, what do you expect the initial cost will be for the infrastructure?
Well, I mean, I'm not an economist, and that's some of the weaknesses that we have. We don't have those numbers. In fact, I was in a meeting last Friday with the two economists in A&M, so we really need to have a good comparison. Not only the systems, because you can have maybe low, medium, and high inputs, and we would like to do that. The next stage will be to compare two systems in addition to the one that we have in a high tunnel with cooling system. But really, Joe, we don't have those numbers, and I think this is very critical. We need to have some estimation and scenarios because it's very different if you do for the homeowner or small farmer as compared to a commercial farmer. So as you know, the tunnel, you can have a tunnel now for as low as $6,000 a hoop house for 30 by 90 or 96. But then if you are going to add the cooling, we set up the second high tunnel with cooling and that cost us about $11,000 just in material. But these are permanent structures. These are very metal structures that you anchor with the concrete, but then it has the cooling systems and polycarbonate on the ends, and then then you have to add almost as much for the labor. I would think that a good structure with labor like that, 30 by 96, it could run close to 20.
Of course. Okay, well, thank you very much.
All right.
Let's go. Wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. Again, thanks for all the presenters, for the participants. And I will send out a PDF copy of the presentation to the counties. Thanks again, and you all have a great day.